You're watching Moms Matter special virtual episode. I'm your host, Shirin Yadigar, and I have a very special guest joining us today, Eve Rodsky. She is the author of Fair Play, a game-changing solution for when you have too much to do. God knows we have too much to do, so thank you, Eve, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Shirin. I always love speaking with you.
Thank you. You know, you acknowledge throughout your book how women really bear the brunt of the household chores and all the domestic work at home. How do you think the pandemic now has changed that?
Well, I'll give you a few things that women have been saying to me, right? I did a poll this week of women and men that are co-parenting. And I'm hearing things like, I'm doing everything related to homeschooling our kids, managing and preparing food rotation, snacks and screen time, arranging Skype for socialization, organizing supplies, arranging for physical activity, communicating with teachers. That was one woman. Another woman said to me, even though we're both working from home, because I have a more flexible job and my husband makes more money than me, I end up doing full-time childcare all day so Dad could get his work done. Meanwhile, I'm falling behind on my job and I don't feel like my time seems to matter.
Right.
So I think that would be indicative of sort of what I think is happening right now in homes. But that's the problem. We know that for 100 years, we've been talking about women have shouldered more than 2/3 of what it takes to run a home and family. But I'd rather talk about the reset, what we could do now, because the beauty of this time is that we are now making the invisible work, the second shift, the emotional labor, the mental load. It is now more visible to men and hetero cisgender relationships than ever.
It is visible, but what I want you to talk to is that there are so many moms who are stay-at-home moms and full-time caring for their families. They don't have a job outside of their home, and they're feeling guilt asking their partners for help. So what's your advice for them?
Well, I posted today on Instagram that you're going to burn guilt and shame, because number one thing I want to say to you out there, my husband is a primary breadwinner in that he makes more money than me. I work just as hard as he does. But when I went on my book tour, I was going to be leaving our home for 5 months on and off. And my husband was going to be holding the metaphor for fair play, right? Is all the fair play cards, the 100 cards you need to run your home and life. Hopefully you're not holding them all. We'll talk about that. But he was going to be holding them all. So instead of just being able to hand it over, I had to do one extra step, Shirin. I had to write on an origami piece of paper with my daughter's silver Sharpie the words guilt and shame. I folded up the origami paper into a little square and I used a lighter and I set it on fire. Now more than ever, I want us all to literally do that. Take a piece of paper, don't burn your house down, write guilt and shame on it and burn it. Because to have it all, we cannot do it all.
1,000.
Want to send that again to your listeners.
Say it again.
To have it all, we cannot do it all. And even if you are not the primary breadwinner in your house, it does not mean that all the invisible unpaid labor for your home should fall on one person if you're privileged enough to have a partner.
That's right. Amen. I love that, Eve. And I wanted you to shout that out. And I think we should all get together and burn that guilty piece of paper today, because we're in this for the long haul. This pandemic is not going away tomorrow.
No, it's not. And I want to talk about the Dirty Dozen. So this is the Dirty Dozen. These are the 12 fair play cards. So what I did was I went out and I interviewed over social media over 100 women and men. I asked them to look at the fair play cards online and to circle the ones that they've been having those fights over. So, Shirin, there's a Dirty Dozen.
Let's hear it.
And it's a baker's dozen if you have kids. So these are the ones that are being identified as causing the most problems in homes right now. In terms of who does what? Laundry, groceries, meals, because now we're having three of them a day.
Yep.
Home supplies, like who's keeping up with the toilet paper and the hand sanitizer. Tidying up, cleaning, deep cleaning, dishes, garbage. Now, these are the ones you add if you have children.
Oh, God.
Homework, which has become homeschool. Discipline and screen time. The watching of kids, whether it's a toddler to a teenager, to make sure they don't escape their quarantine and see their friends. And finally, social interactions for kids, keeping them up with the Zoom calls and the Skypes and the FaceTimes for their friends.
Right.
So that dirty dozen, those 12 cards have been identified, especially in hetero-cisgender relationships, as causing the most consternation right now. So that's what I want us to focus on.
Okay, so when we talk about the dirty dozen, and I'm sure everyone watching can agree with you, I mean, there's no way to refute that. But the question is, and you mentioned this in the book, which I think is brilliant, you say, let's divide it fairly. It doesn't need to be 50-50. So what do you mean by that?
Number one, this is the time more than ever. All Fair Play is asking you to do, all the book is asking you to do is communicate. Half of the book is about tools, including a game you can download on fairplaylife.com for free. Tools and boundaries for how you can communicate with your partner. Communication now is so important, Sharon. And if we don't have a practice of how to do that, yes, it's hard to develop a new practice in a pandemic. But what I'm saying to women, and sick, literally physically sick from all of this unpaid work, because we're not meant to be teachers and parents and cleaners and workers all in one, right? That's why we do have usually a somewhat of a safety net, hopefully. But that safety net is now gone. And most of it is now falling on two different people. And if it doesn't fall on one person, it's going to make us sick. So what did you do? So this is the three things I want to tell your viewers about communication. 3 practical tips. And obviously you can find more and listen to Fair Play on Audible for the full panoply of tips on communication. But the 3 ones for this live. Number 1, no feedback in the moment. Women in my surveys and my 500 plus interviews for Fair Play, one of their number 1 communication vulnerabilities that they admitted to me was giving feedback in the moment.
Huge.
Wipe the sponge there. Wash your hands. Just the feedback in the moment. And then their male partners were saying, I can't hear feedback in the moment. I devote 20 pages to Fair Play, from the scientific arguments, the economic arguments, the psychological arguments for why feedback in the moment is toxic. So if you're somebody like me who suffers from bad timing, communication vulnerability, thanks for that flowers, Seth. I love you so much, but you forgot to bring home detergent when you went to the store, right?
Right.
Bad timing. Then what you can do is you can set a nightly check-in.
Okay.
So number 1, step 1, no feedback in the moment. That practice is hard, but it's a practice, just like meditation, just like exercise. Practice makes perfect. It doesn't happen once. You can't communicate once and expect everything to be perfect. You can't expect to exercise once in your life and to be fit forever.
Absolutely.
Practice makes perfect. So number 1, no feedback in the moment. Number 2, a nightly check-in. And what I mean by that is brevity. No more than 15 minutes to say, hey, there's this dirty dozen I heard about. It's causing a lot of fights for couples. And I just think we should just say it, like, check in to see how we're doing on it every day. Even if I'm doing most of it, because that's what's fair for our household. I'd still like to sit down and check in on us, see how we're doing, how we're feeling, how our time is. So number 1, no feedback in the moment. Number 2, a nightly check-in. Number 3, start with your why. So I'll just tell you a quick little story. So a woman who's playing Fair Play, she tells me that her husband came in with groceries. He went to Trader Joe's. He started walking in the house to start putting the pickles away. And she says, wash your hands. And she goes even like higher pitch. I have a low voice. I can't go that high. But she demonstrated the piercing way she said, wash your hands to her partner.
Right.
So he drops the bag and just walks away. So A, he did not wash his hands, to her knowledge. And B, they broke eggs. The eggs broke. And at this time, when you don't want to go to the grocery store, that sucks. So what she says is they're used to the practice of a nightly check-in. She said, fair play didn't prevent me from giving feedback in the moment, but what it allowed us to do was come back to the table that night. And so she sat and started with her why. So step 3 is start with your why. And she said, everything in my life is out of control right now. I am somebody who is a self-proclaimed control freak. I like to control my environment. So especially for me, this pandemic, this situation is so out of my comfort zone that the only thing I can do to invest in my mental health is to control the things we can control. And one of those is washing our hands. So when you wash your hands for me, or when I see you do it, instead of looking at it as washing your hands, look at it as the cheapest investment you can make in my mental health. It's cheaper than a therapist.
Right.
And then her husband was able to say back to her, you know what? That's why I have Purell in my pocket. And I had Purelled my hands before I walked in the door. And they were able to have a dialogue. Right. That's all I'm asking for people to start investing in their relationships like they're investing in toilet paper.
I mean, you're absolutely right, but your tips are so easy. And now that we actually do have the time to invest in our relationships, those 3 tips can really change. It's this life-changing. So I think it's huge.
They are life-changing. I will repeat them again. No feedback in the moment. Set a nightly check-in, or at least a weekly check-in where there's a time when you can communicate when emotion is low and cognition is high. And number 3, start with your why. Even when you do that with your kids in this moment, it's so helpful. So instead of saying to Ben, get on your Zoom call, we start the day with, why are you being educated today? Why are we continuing education at home? Well, because we want you to show up for your teachers, because they're still working really hard for you. We want you to still understand math so you're not stressed when you go back to school next year. So you start with your why, whether it's your kids or your husband, your partner. Starting with your why is a very powerful communication tool. And I can tell you that as being a mediator for over a decade.
Well, I mean, I love that. I also think, Eve, you mentioned this in an article that you recently wrote in Harper's Bazaar about how this is a time where we really are reevaluating what's important. And because we have the time at home to do so, when is the opportune time? Like you talk about the 15-minute check-in at night, and that's great. But really, when is an opportune time to sit down with your partner and talk about how you are reevaluating things, right? We're looking at things much differently now.
Absolutely. And I really do think this is a beautiful reset button. Sharon, it's a beautiful reset button. It's, even for the most conservative of men, I have coming to the table now saying, I had this one guy, he had this really funny quote. I'll read it to you. He said, he's been doing a lot more in the home. It's been really much more visible to him. And he said to me, I said, I'd love to interview you and talk to you about that. And he said, well, yes. Let me read it, the actual quote. It's really funny. He said, sure thing. I'd love to be interviewed, especially if you're willing to see a dude cough up the biggest, whoa, I've been a jerk fur ball ever. So I think, even the most conservative of our partners are going to, even if they're working outside the home, they're going to see the stress. They're going to see the invisible work becoming more visible. And I think that there is really beauty in that, because we can revert to traditional gender roles, or we can hit that reset button and say, this is a time for us to invest in our relationship. And, let's trade our commute time for communication time. Even,
I love that.
Do it with tequila and do it with cookie dough pints. That's what I've been using. I've been eating those Trader Joe's small baby cones.
Right.
Do it with something fun. It doesn't have to be so serious. But if you can gamify things online, I'm putting up this week something called the Fair Play Life Bingo.
Ooh.
As the Dirty Dozen. You can print out the bingo card. And what I'd love for everybody to do is just cross off, like a bingo board, when you're done communicating about something. So hit the full Dirty Dozen and say, each week we want to play bingo, and cross off, how are we doing with homeschooling? Why are we doing this? How are we doing with dishes? Are you bringing your plate to the sink? Because even that little gesture really saves a lot of effort and resentment for me. You just start talking about these things and it becomes a practice.
I mean, it's amazing. We just spoke for 10 minutes, and I think for everyone who tuned in, you really could change the whole environment at home so easily. I mean, your tips are so easy to execute, and you can walk out of this pandemic really, like you said, resetting your entire life. It's amazing.
Yes. And I will say, look, private lives are public issues.
Yes.
This is not about how necessarily you do things in your home. This is about a cultural conversation for all of us, that women for 100 years have been holding 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family. And it doesn't have to be that way anymore.
That's right.
It just takes one game changer. I love Nora Ephron. She says you can be the victim of your own life, or you can. The thing is, we are all the heroines of our own lives.
That's right.
And again, yes, I'm asking women to take the lead to start these conversations, but I'm not asking women to be in charge of the solution. This is not the lean in for the home. This is, yes, you may be the one taking charge of the conversation, but the solution involves both parties. And
Absolutely.
it doesn't have to be 50-50, but it does have to feel fair.
100%.
Fairness is a more important indicator of relationship happiness than actual fairness.
Well, I love that. And I think we're all going to walk away. Those of you who don't have a copy, honestly, you have the time to read now. It will change your life. Your partner should read it. My husband's read it. I've read it. It's really changed things at home for us. You can get it on Amazon. Eve, you're a wealth of knowledge. You're so honest and sincere. And I just love how you exude all this great energy. And I do hope that all together we can reset the button and things can become a little bit more fair at home.
That's what we'll do. Let's keep having these conversations, but we're all in this together. There's no one right way to do a pandemic. And I really appreciate that you you're keep doing what you're doing, Sharon, because you're bringing voices out there for your communities. And it's really important. Your work is really important right now.
I appreciate you. And I think when we get off of this interview, we're all going to create the guilt card and we're going to burn it together.
Burn it.
I'm going to burn it.
Put it on a piece of paper. I want you to put guilt and shame on it and literally light it on fire. Send me a picture of it. I will probably do it with you again. But burning guilt and shame, don't worry about color-coded homework schedules or any sort of, the only green vegetable that's going on my kids' plates right now are the green shamrocks from Lucky Charms. That's it. We're just trying to do our best.
We are just trying to do our best, and we're hopefully gonna create a better world when this is all over.
Yeah.
And you saw it right here on Moms Matter at EverTalk TV. Eve Rodsky, author of Fair Play, and we'll see you all again next time.
Thanks so much.